Women are still being talked over and talked past in meetings, boardrooms, and virtual calls. But what if the problem isn't your voice? It's the system not built to hear it. Welcome to PhD with Women on It, Hack the Future. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by our guest Elizabeth Bachman. Topic: Do you feel invisible? How presentation skills can help you become a leader. Episode 181 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my motto, and empathy is critical to presentation skills. Do you feel invisible? These presentation skills matter. Let's learn from Elizabeth Bachman, international opera director turned presentation skills trainer, who's on a mission to help women feeling invisible and start getting results when they speak. With over 30 years directing legends and now coaching high-level women in tech and law, Elizabeth brings a masterful blend of strategy, empathy, and stage presence to leadership communication. She helped women around the world command rooms, win allies, and get the recognition they deserve. The challenges are still real. Men interrupt, women get ignored, and leadership visibility remains uncharted territory for too many. Elizabeth, let's start with a simple question. Where in the world are you joining us from?
Right now, I'm in my office in the Austrian Alps between Innsbruck and Munich. So we're in a vacation area.
Beautiful location. I guess it's very hilly there, isn't it?
We're in the mountains. Yes. Yes.
Beautiful. Well, I'm joining still from Grand Turk. This is a recorded podcast. We are going to travel for the next 2 months. Elizabeth, I have to admit that I lost my breath a bit. I was a bit intimidated by your expertise, I have to say. What do you say to that?
I think that's in your head and that's really what I help people get past is this whole imposter syndrome of I'm not good enough if somebody else is, has a different set of credits.
Well, I checked your podcast, and your podcast description hits right at the heart of something so many women experience, that feeling of being invisible, of speaking into void. Studies have shown women are interrupted up to 3 times more often than men in meetings. Can you take us back? Where was there a specific moment, perhaps even in the high stakes world of opera, where you felt that sting, where you knew you had something vital to say, but you just couldn't speak?
Oh, that's a very good question. Nobody's ever asked me that quite that way before. I, when I became a director, I I was listened to because that was the job. You were brought in to be the person who, as a stage director, the simplest thing is that you say you go here and you go there, and depending on who they are, they do it or you don't. Then you negotiate. Uh, but involved a lot more than that. So people were pretty good about listening to me, except when you came to the young men whose careers were rising and they were doing so very well that they before they'd ever failed. Everything had been a success, and then they would tell me how it was supposed to go, even though it was my job to tell them how it was supposed to go. I used to describe that as the boys who were too busy talking to have any time to listen. That I don't know if you've ever met any of those, but I met a lot of them in my opera days.
Oh, absolutely. We call after Cindy Gallop coined them white guys talking to white guys about other white guys.
Well, yeah, it's not a terrible thing. It is a natural thing.
Yeah. You've
But
worked.
yes, but that's where I first noticed it. Yes.
Mm. Well, let's talk about a slightly older generation. You've worked with true legends, Pavarotti, Domingo, giants who commanded attention with seemingly just a breath. So, what was the most surprising lesson you learned about presence and holding space from directing these masters?
Well, I found that I worked with so many different people, everything from teenagers doing their first aria ever to legends like Luciano Pavarotti and Placido Domingo. Uh, they all got nervous. They all had their moments of wondering if it was going to be okay. And what was most important was whether you had practiced enough. That's the most important part is practice muscle memory, even when you're singing, but also when you're speaking, can help you a lot. And people forget that singing and speaking are both physical acts. We have to train your lips and tongue and breath to produce the sound. And that's the thing I found with speakers is that they forget it's going to be different when you say it than it is when you read it.
Mm. Well, I have to tell you my experience as a teenager. I used to present some poems, and the big mic drop moment was when, before I had to present and the other troops, there was a competition going on.
Mhm.
We had this actor who came on the stage and he introduced himself in his normal voice, and then he started presenting. And what struck me was, and that was something that I had to learn, was that he was still natural. It sounded like his natural voice. Whereas when I was acting, I was acting. It
Mhm.
wasn't my natural voice. So that's one thing that I think we can take from this discussion. Uh, would it be similar to opera singers?
Well, opera is artificial anyway. So the important part is to convey the message. Think about it before you say it. And with opera singers, it's then you also shape the music, and the music is going to tell you what the composer thought. And then you can add your own interpretation on it. What's most important is that you have an idea about what you're saying and why. And the really lazy singers can sit back and let the orchestra pull them instead of them pulling the orchestra.
Mm. Well, we are not going to talk much more about Tosca, but opera singers project their voices. Here is an interesting fact without microphones to
Correct.
reach 4,000 seat halls.
Hmm.
We had another speaker, episode 177, Jodie Krangle, uncovered the art of voice acting. So, how do you teach women to project their power in rooms that silence them?
Well, that's a very big question. There's a lot to it. Most importantly, it's all about perception. How do people perceive you? And if you're just ordinary, say you've got just sounding ordinary and like the quiet, nice, polite person in the corner, you will be treated as the quiet, nice person in the corner and taken for granted. I believe that presentation and leadership is the way you speak is one of the big tools of leadership, and the way you listen is one of the big tools of leadership. Often women are taught as children, as girls, to be quiet or to do what I call the sorry habit, where you say, well, sorry, but should I don't know if this is a good idea, but da 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 da. All of which depositions you. I believe it's about managing perception, and that you can change how you're perceived by changing how you communicate.
That's a very powerful statement, and especially given the fact that women are interrupted 2.6 times more than men in meetings. You've said speaking up can be a challenge. Being heard when you do is even more of a challenge. What's the first move a woman should make when a colleague talks over her?
It tends to be a sort of a longer term thing. So right away, you could just say, thank you for sharing my idea. Let me finish what I was going to say. That's something that you can do on the spot. Even better, though, is if you have an ally in the room, hopefully it's the person who's running the meeting who could say, wait, we want to hear the rest of what Beata has to say. Or it's so often if you can get another woman in the room to say, wait, that was Beata's idea. Let me hear more, or let's let Beata finish. You can always say it, but it does sound better if it comes from someone else. So speaking up right away and then having your allies help you is a very good tactic.
Senator Kamala Harris turned to Pence and said, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking, when he continued to talk over her.
Yep.
Political sentiments aside, then she repeated once again, I'm speaking, and there is a study performed by the Northwestern School of Law that found that while women represented less than a quarter of people on the Supreme Court, they were interrupted 32% of the time, according to court records. So if it would appear that even when women rise to the top ranks, they are still likely to be interrupted by the men around them. So share your graceful interjection script.
It's more than a graceful interjection. Basically, interrupting women is a habit. It's something that you probably learn in childhood, and it's not necessarily no one ever teaches us exactly how to do it. Society teaches us. So we're socialized. Boys are socialized to interrupt girls, and it isn't just gender based. It's not that binary. There are plenty of women who will interrupt other people too, male or female. It is a conversational habit. So how do you change a habit? You change it by, first of all, becoming aware that you're doing it. And secondly, taking small steps. So if you're the person who's being interrupted, one of the things that you can do is to speak to, if there's one person who's regularly interrupting you, you can speak to that person and say, do you realize that you're constantly interrupting me? And that means that the ideas aren't getting through. It's slowing us down. Would you be willing to try not to do that? And sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. That sort of thing is better if it comes from somebody else. So if you can get a manager to say that to the person who's regularly interrupting, it is a habit that can be changed. They just have to know why they should, what they want to do, and be aware of it, and then stop themselves. Like any other habit, it's how do you not reach for that second cookie when the whole plate is in front of you? You have to be aware that you're doing it instead of just eating the whole plate of cookies. And if somebody says, stop, notice, it can be done. It's part of a whole program that I do with my clients, male and female, in terms of over a long term. I also think it's part of enrolling the other person as an ally and enrolling the leader of the group as an ally so that they're the person who makes sure that everybody gets heard. Good leaders know that they're going to get better results if they hear from everybody. So
Mm.
that's part one. Part two is to recognize that there's really two ways of thinking. And so if you're not clear, part two is to be clear and concise as much as you can. People say, yeah, well, whatever. That happens. But to prepare your talking points so that they are clear and concise. Um, and if you're curious, I'll tell you why that matters.
Oh, let's go for it.
So, so my belief is colored from having been in a male dominated industry in the opera business for years. What I've noticed about language is that in addition to all the personality tests that we take, like the DISC profiles or Myers-Briggs or Enneagram, or any of those, all of which are really useful, there's the other miscommunication that we don't notice because we're so used to it, which is that women think men don't listen to them and men think women never get to the point. Have you ever heard that?
Mm.
So this is, people tell me all the time. So I'm constantly getting this complaint. What I believe is that we're using the same words, but we're speaking two different languages. There is an old tradition of men's language and women's language, which for centuries you've had the way men spoke and the way women spoke. I mean, I can think of in my theater background, 16th century plays that make fun of women never getting to the point. So this has been going on for a long time. It's really only been in the last 40 years or so, especially in the last 20 years, that women have started to take an equal place in business, which was built on men's language. Now, it's not just gender based. So there's a whole spectrum. And but I think of it as single focus thinkers and multi focus thinkers. And bearing in mind that there's a lot of people or there's a lot in between, but just for simplicity's sake, let's say that single focus thinkers are traditionally men, historically men, but not always. There are a lot of single focused women, I know. And what they are is they're task oriented. They'll do one thing at a time. They do it till it's done. And that's great because that's how you get a project finished. That's how you get a project out to market, for instance. On the other hand, you have the multi-focus thinkers who are traditionally women, historically women, but not always. Once again, I know lots of men who come to me and say, how come they're not listening to me? And it's because they're telling rambling stories. And these are the people who see all the side issues that might derail the project. The advantage of the single focus thinker is that they have that's how things get done. The disadvantage is that it can easily fall into tunnel vision. So they only think about and they don't see the side issues that are going to make a difference. The multi-focus thinkers see the word in a web of relationships so that everything's related to everything. And they're the ones who can see, for instance, this actually happened to a client of mine. They could say to the men who want to build a fabulous new app that has all sorts of bells and whistles. And she said to the person who was in charge of the project, did you know that our clients, our competitors already have something that does this? It's not as fancy as yours. It's not as shiny and new as yours, but it works. Why are we reinventing the wheel? And unfortunately, he was so in love with his idea that he actually fired her from the project, moved her over to something else, and they spent hundreds of hours and thousands and thousands of dollars creating a fabulous new app that nobody used. They couldn't sell it because there was already something on the market that worked. So
It happened to me.
that's right. It's happened to me too. Yes.
It happened to me, and I have to tell you that 2 years. I wasn't fired. I was because it was a board of directors. I wasn't paid on, but I was the only one woman, and the only one who was trying to stop it from happening. We didn't have much money. It was NGO, and I just didn't. I just knew it's going to flop, and. But old boys club, they know better. So I had to just let it go. Would
Yeah.
you advise let it go
That's
or
a good
leave?
question. That's a good question. What you can do. So if you're on a board, if you have the power, get onto the nomination committee and recruit at least 2 other women or minorities. So the magic number seems to be 3. If you're only 1, it's easy to ignore you. If you are 2, then they say, "Oh, those are the girls over there. We're not going to pay attention to them." The magic number seems to be having 3 diverse voices in the group, so that's when people start to listen. So that's a long-term strategy. The short-term strategy is if you can see something, like if they're not listening, or if they're actively blocking you, go around, find out who they do listen to, and enroll that person as an ally. So that person will say, "Hey, Beata just told me about such and so, and it's going to be a problem." If they're not going to listen to you because you're the only woman, they're not going to listen to you. You might
What?
as well enroll an ally and get
Mm,
somebody else to come in and see if somebody else can tell them. Doesn't always work, but that is a way that you can get around it.
that's a strategy. You coached women in tech and law to promotions by raising their profiles. What's a
Mhm.
story of a client that went from invisible to unstoppable? What was that aha moment?
One of my favorite clients, I call her Janet. That's not her real name because we have a privacy agreement, but she's a real person. And she was the IT person for a prestigious research organization, a tech research organization. And she was a senior director. She always kept solving problems for the company. But they said, "Great, thanks," and took her for granted. So she was complaining to a friend who said, "Talk to Elizabeth Bachman, she can help." And she called me up and she said, "I've been solving problems for them for years, and I get no recognition, no raise, no promotion. Uh, can you help?" And so what we did was the next time they asked her to solve a problem, which was a company wide software issue, and she knew how to solve it. Instead of just going ahead and fixing it, she went to each person in the executive suite and said, "Here's my strategic plan for fixing it." The words strategic plan are very important. And then she addressed something that person was interested in. It was men and women on the community, on the committee. So she picked something that each person cared about and got them excited. So, will you help me convince the others? Will this is going to save us money, or for another one, this is going to make us money. Uh, and so she had a slightly different pitch for each one, but it touched on something that they cared about, so they got excited. And indeed, the next time they had an executive committee meeting, they created a vice president position for her because they were so excited.
Excellent. Your
Yeah.
podcast, Speakers Who Get Results, explores cross cultural communication. What's one gesture or phrase that's powerful in one culture and is disastrous in other?
Ah, well, I live half the year in Austria. My wife is German, so I think a lot about communication between German speakers and English speakers. Here's one that happens is that Americans, shall we say, think that Germans are really rude because American English, especially for women, has all sorts of helper words where you'll say, "Would you please? If you'd be so kind as, could you go close the window, please? I've gotten cold," or things like that. Whereas the Germans will say, "Close the window." And to the Americans, it feels like they're being ordered around. Whereas my German friends say, why do the Americans use all these wishy washy filler words? Just say it. It's the way the language works. I ran for 11 years. I ran an opera company that brought together German speaking and English speaking singers. It was particularly focused on training young singers and giving opportunities to young singers. And that was one of the things I would say on day one is if you're living and working together with someone who frankly looks like you, but has a whole different upbringing, you have to learn to listen. And one of the big ones that people get in trouble with, even now, you have German or Austrian executives who go to America to work, and their American teams say, "Why is she so rude? Why is she so mean?" When actually it's just the way the language works. German doesn't use all those "if you please" filler words. It's where I see if you only understood, you wouldn't get mad. But it's changing how you're perceived by changing how you communicate.
We often hear advice for women to lower their vocal pitch to sound more authoritative,
Mhm.
referencing studies about how listeners perceive pitch or upspeak. We had some follow up discussion with Jody Scrangle from a gentleman who suggested we should avoid vocal fry. So, what is vocal fry and should we avoid it?
Vocal fry is when you are forcing your voice to the point where you damage the vocal cords. Just lowering the pitch of the way you speak is should not lead to vocal fry unless you are really misusing your voice. Uh, what I find is so here's a concept, is one of the fundamental concepts that I work with. I call it strategic empathy, which is anytime you're trying to convince somebody to do something that you want them to do, that's marketing. And rule number one in marketing is give the other person what they're looking for, address what they want. So I call it strategic empathy, which is to put yourself in the shoes of your listeners. If your listeners think that this little high voice sounds like Betty Boop or sounds like somebody just on a high and it's sort of all these cultural implications attached to a high little voice that has a little uptick, you're projecting an image of somebody who's not serious. So just lower your voice a couple of notes, lower the range that you speak in a little bit, speak more from the chest than from the head, because we have a cultural expectation that lower voices have more authority. And that comes from centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries of men being the authority figures, uh, at least in the outside world, to the outside world. It's not fair I have a lot of women say to me, I'm just so tired of having to adapt and, just to change myself so that they'll listen to me. It's not fair. It really is not fair. And my thought is, if it works, why not? Who does it hurt if if you try to say, you can still, let me put it a different way. You can still be authentic and speak in a way that they can hear you.
Well, in Japan, women historically used higher pitched office voice to
Yes.
sound differential. So that's interesting that you're trying to still, fit in. We have to fit in. We have to have these. I would actually call it, Elizabeth, maybe you disagree with me, but I would call it, you have to prepare for that fighting match properly. So these gloves of low voice is actually, one of the preparation for the ring when you have to fight that match.
Well, here's another piece. If you think of the single focus thinkers and the multi-focus thinkers, the advantage of the single focus thinkers is they do one thing at a time and they're focused and things get done. The multi-focus thinkers can hold 5 ideas in their heads at once, which is also very good. But as relational thinkers, the disadvantage there, and we're taught this by our grandmothers teach us this one, is that anytime a man pushes back or somebody pushes back against you, it feels like it's personal. And that's something that one took me years to learn. I wish I'd known that earlier on in my career, is that it's not necessarily personal, but if you think of it as gender-based education, which is what happens, it's breaking, the differences are breaking down a bit nowadays, but it's still out of centuries. A lot of boys are taught to compete instead of collaborate. So if somebody is pushing back, telling you no, sometimes it means that they're trying to help you refine your idea by letting you fight for it, because that's what another guy would do. And this is a gross generalization, of course. So there are nuances to all of this, but in general, if a woman recognizes that this is a pattern, a habit somebody learned as a child, they may not be aware they're doing. Now, of course, they might actually be out to get you. That happens too. So that, that does happen, but often it's just a habit. What I find is the most useful is to think of it as 2 different languages. We're using the same words, we're speaking 2 different languages. So for instance, if say men spoke Spanish and women spoke Italian, if you're speaking Italian to a Spanish speaker, they're going to get more or less what you have to say because the languages are very similar, but you're going to recognize that it's a different language. So if it's important, you're going to speak to them in Spanish, or you're going to get an interpreter to help you speak them in Spanish, but you're going to know that it's a different language. One of the things that happens, just a little PS to this, one of the things that happens a lot is a woman will say something to a single focus person, and that person goes, yeah. But they're focused. They really, truly do not hear it. And if the woman isn't clear enough or doesn't get their attention, the woman thinks she's been understood. The man is oblivious. And this is where we get the stereotype of men don't listen, men are clueless. I mean, women have stereotypes as much as men do. So if you recognize that that person is a single focus person, then you'll know to say, make an appointment. Just say, I need your attention for about 20 minutes to talk about this project. When is a time when I can get your full attention? And they'll say, I don't know, 4 o'clock today. So then at 4 o'clock, they're fully focused on you, which is great. And then you can say what you need to say, and they will listen. But yeah, so that's one of the things, the traps that women fall into all the time.
You raised 100K for your opera company. Men ask for 30% more funding than women. How do you turn I'm grateful for 100 into I'm worth 1 million?
Oh, that took me a long time, and I'm still working on it. I didn't know then. That was when I learned the value of public speaking. When I wanted to, actually, let me start. I have to give you the context because I'm a woman. Context is everything. Um, mm. Here's another piece, because one of the other things that causes us to communication breakdown is that single focused people want the point right away. They want very they have a short attention span unless they understand why it matters. The multi-focused people want to tell you the context. So that's why they're the ones that are going to start the conversation with, so 30 years ago this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, this happened, by which time you've lost the attention of the single focused person. Much as the single focused person might want to know, they still have one thing in their head. So here's another technique that multi-focused people can use, which is you set the time so they know they're supposed to listen, and then also tell them uh, either this is something that needs action or it's an update, because that changes the way you listen. And then you say, here's the thing, here's my idea. Now let me tell you how I got here. But if they know right away what the point is, like just the three things, and then you could tell them the details that matter, as long as they know where you're going, they're much more likely to listen. The other, and I will get to the opera singer question, in the opera company question, in a minute. For me, it started when I wanted to run an opera company. So I was one of the early women as a stage director, and I knew that the time would come where I knew I could do more. I wanted to run an opera company, and so after I was pretty well known in the business, a lot of people I know would say, "Wow, great! Any company you run, you bet I'll be there. I'll come in a minute." And so I started applying, and over, I would apply to be the general director or the artistic director of a company. And I would be number 2, number 3 on the list, always on the short list every time. And I always saw the job go to a man. I did recognize at the time that some of that was gender bias. But what I didn't know that I know now is that I wasn't marketing myself right. I wasn't telling them, first of all, I wasn't marketing myself to the people who were actually making the decisions. Being well known by my peers was one thing, but the people who actually make the decisions, who actually hire the general director, are the boards of trustees. I should have been addressing what they cared about, putting myself in their shoes, which I didn't learn until much later. So I founded my own opera company, and that's where I had to learn to speak to get people to open their wallets. It was basically sales, and I had not really done sales before, and especially selling a project that was my project, that was me. When I first started to ask for money for my dream, I was terrified. And frankly, I was terrible. My first few speeches were really bad. What saved me was a presentation skills trainer who came to one of my house parties, and called me up the next day and said, you know, there are some things you could do that could get you better results. And I realized I didn't know that there was a whole art to public speaking and asking for a sale, which I'd never run across before. I had never been my job. So I thought, I've told the world I'm going to create this company, but I don't have the money to launch it. I need help. And what I realized was I couldn't do it on my own. I needed help. And here was this lovely woman who had the skills I needed. She was expensive. I didn't know where I was going to find the money. But I also realized that the people, my dedication to the people who would be helped by working in this company, by the young artists that we were going to help, my dedication to that had to be greater than my fear. So I scrounged around and I found the money to hire her. And she taught me all these skills that I'm using now, actually. And I'll never forget the first time I went to a society wife in San Francisco who I thought might give me $300, and she wrote me a check for $3,000, which at that time was a full scholarship. And she said, "I know you haven't done the program yet, but I believe you're going to be able to do it. Here's a full scholarship for some deserving singer." So it worked.
Let's talk about your transition. So 30 years, breathing the air of international opera, and then pivot to coaching leaders. You mentioned the music losing its ability to transport you. That takes incredible self-awareness and courage to admit. Tell me about the moment you realized your next stage was helping others to find their voice.
It was sort of a gradual process. What I learned, what I discovered with the opera was I loved the music, I loved the art form. And when you're working with young singers, it's the same 20 arias over and over again. So you repeat a lot. And I began to realize that it wasn't so much the glory of the music as it was becoming work instead of fun. And I thought, if I don't stop now, um, I'm going to wind up a bitter, angry person and I won't love the music anymore. I have to get out while I can still love the music. By then, I was already coaching singers. So speakers. My friends had said, "Here, you do all this work with singers. Can you help me with my speech?" So I was already helping speakers. And so decided it was time to move into that full time.
Elizabeth, this conversation is truly a comeback guide for so many. If you could leave every woman listening today who has ever felt diminished or invisible when they spoke with one core belief, one piece of empowering wisdom to hold on to as she steps forward to climb the recognition she deserves, what would it be?
Find your allies. Work with people who've been down the road before you, who've been maybe a little bit further down the road and can support you, but also work with people who have the technical skills to help you be better. Because too many of us think we have to do it alone. This is another myth that girls are taught. I don't know where that comes from, but you have to do this all by yourself. No, work with a group. Work with a coach, a coach like me or someone similar, and then work with the people who are going to support you, who are going to say, okay, don't chicken out, don't be afraid, say yes to that opportunity. Don't be safe. Risk it. We're here to catch you if something happens.
And what are the top three soft skills all career driven females, in your opinion, should have?
good speaking skills, and executive present is part of that. It's how you speak, what you say, and your delivery style. So all of that is very important. Self-awareness is another thing. Soft skills, I don't call them soft skills. I call them leadership skills. Women tend to be very good at empathy and inclusion, including their teams. But women don't always step forward and take the lead. So I would say make sure you can take the lead, practice it, and then have your allies around you who are going to catch you if you make a mistake. Because we all make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Decide what you're going to do, get help, and then go ahead and do it.
Are you working on any exciting new project right now?
I've got several interesting things. I've been doing a lot of speeches lately for women in healthcare, which is very exciting. And it's another male dominated industry. So I've got a program called Visible and Valued that teaches you how to show up and be the person that be seen, but also be valued for what you're good at. And that includes recognizing your own value.
That's very apt, and I think also it's very difficult because those who are working in healthcare not only have to deal with pressure, time pressure, also with patients, their family members. So thank you for doing that, Elizabeth. Um, Eleanor Roosevelt once said, "Women are like tea bags. We don't know our true strength until we are in hot water." So, in life, how are you in hot water? How are you brewing, Elizabeth?
Uh, I try to keep the temperature stable. So, um, hot water will come along whether I want it to or not. So, the more I can keep myself at an even keel, I'm a very even tempered person. So, it's easier. I'm not one of the people that loves lots of change. I tend to be pretty stable and organized, and if I can keep my life that way, that works pretty well for me. Challenges will come no matter what. So as long as I can get as much control over whatever I can control, then I can manage the challenges. And I also
And
have to say that comes with experience too. The
yeah,
first time you hit a challenge, you think it's the end of the world. So this time it helps to just say, okay, this too shall pass.
this too shall pass. It takes maturity. What is the number one book you can sit and think, I wish I read it before I started my career?
There's a wonderful book by my friend Ellen Connolly Taafe, Taafe, called The Mirrored Door. And it's for women, how women see a door that reflects back to them and says, you may not go through, when actually it wasn't closed at all. It's the voices in our head that are telling us we can't go through. And that came out a couple of years ago. I really wish it had been around when I wanted to run an opera company, when I was applying to run an opera company. Um, I made so many mistakes that I really wish I had known that then. I might still be running an opera company now if I had followed her advice in those days.
Let's imagine that you could meet anyone in the world for a private breakfast, anywhere in the world. Who would it be and where would you go to?
I have often thought that so I grew up in theater. That since I was 5 years old, I've been in theater. I often thought it would be fun to have a round table breakfast where we would have William Shakespeare and Moliere and Oscar Wilde and Noel Coward, all funny guys, and talk about comedy and talk about civilization and how comedy evolves. Uh, I think it would either be the funniest, most laughter filled time ever, or it would be the absolute worst because they were all divas and they might all want to be the only star there. So it would either be the best breakfast ever or the worst.
Plus the cultural differences, right?
Yes. Well, one assumes since they've all passed that they've all met in heaven and they understand the cultural difference. One will assume that from the beginning.
Okay, let's leave it at this. Can you please give us your favorite life lesson quote and how did it change you?
I don't know where the quote came from, but there's a mantra that somebody mentioned to me once that I go back to if I'm worried or stressed. And that goes, let it be, let it go. I choose a life of ease and flow. And when things are tough, I sit in the corner and I close my eyes and I just chant that over and over and over. And that has helped me a lot.
Designing a presentation without an audience in mind is like writing a love letter and addressing it to whom it may concern, Ken Hammer said. What would be a message, a letter, or a short message you could engrave on every woman's microphone?
Make it about them. Make it about the audience. Who who are you serving by telling this story, by giving this speech? And also remember you might not know. So give the speech as if there's one person out there who's hurting, who's going to be just in the right mental space to hear what you have to say. And know that you're going to change that person's life. You might never hear from them, but that's who you're talking to. That one person who really needs to hear your message. So make it about them.
Make it about them. You also help women to be loose, friendly, funny, and still taken seriously. What's your secret to balancing warmth with authority?
I don't think I can do that in 10 minutes. That's it. It's part of the whole process, which is being loose and friendly and funny comes when you get out of your own way. And that doesn't happen from one day to the next. I wish it did. I would bottle it and sell it as a magic elixir, and I'd be a bazillionaire. But no, it takes practice. It's like going to the gym. You have to do it over and over again, and at some point you look back and you say, "Oh, I didn't used to be able to do that, and now that's easy for me." But it's not. It's a series of a lot of little things that add up to that confidence.
Smiling while speaking lowers vocal pitch, boosting perceived competence by 40%. So that's another great nugget of information. How do you master this tightrope?
Practice, just practice. When I started the opera company, uh, I had to. There are little tricks you could do to remind yourself to smile. Now I've worked on it long enough that I know to smile, but I have, upon occasion, given an entire speech and never smiled once. And a friend of mine told me that. She said, "Did you realize you never smiled during that whole pitch?" And I said, "Why didn't you tell me? I wasn't aware. I was so focused on what I was trying to say." It's just practice. Just practice.
Practice over perfection is another line that we like to use. And here is another great quotation. The success of your presentation will be judged not by the knowledge you send, but what the listener receives. Lily Waters said. Well,
Exactly. That's make it about them.
Make it about them is the message that Elizabeth would engrave on every woman's microphone. And that's it from episode 181 of the PhD livestream. Thanks to our guest, Elizabeth Bachman. To stay updated and ensure you never miss a positivity hack delivered, follow Woman on It and turn on notifications to be alerted once a video has been released. Next week, we are going to be joined by Ufonobazi Umo. We're gonna talk about text, meet, passion, a path to mastering JavaScript, React, and more. As always, our positivity quote comes from Positive Thinking and goes, look for something positive in each day, even if some days you have to look a little harder. Notice I have a smile when I say that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, today is your day to hug the future, hug the positivity you want. Thank you.